Hey, series, face it. You know, there's some things we want to face. There's some things we don't want to face. But there's some things in our lives, spiritually, we got to face it. We got to face it. Last week, we talked about opinions, and we talked about the children of Israel, the people of God that were wavering between two opinions. We can relate with that at times in our life. We're not sure what God's doing, how He's doing it. We kind of waver. Is God in control? Is He not in control? I just feel out of control. Therefore, God's probably out of control, and that's never the case, is it? God's always in control. He's always on the throne. He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. Amen? I said He'll never leave you, and He'll never forsake you. Amen? Face it. Sometimes we got to push. Sometimes we got to push. Sometimes we equate a push with a potential confrontation. Can I tell you, we have an enemy of our soul that's not afraid to push us around. But we have a God that doesn't like His people getting pushed around. And sometimes we got to push back. We got to push. Years ago, we had an American Bulldog, and he was the coolest dog. He was between 130, 140 pounds. It depended on how many scraps he ate that week, we got him when Hunter was 3, Sierra was 5. And you read up about American Bulldogs, and they're great with kids. They're big, they're huge, they're just all muscle, and people would see him and they go, "That's the biggest pit bull I've ever seen." Not a pit, doesn't have any pit in him. He's an American Bulldog. One of the things about American Bulldogs is you never want them to think they're in control. So at tug of war, you're never to let them win. And truly, as he got older, you just didn't play it anymore because you just couldn't hold on to him. But he had this little thing about him, and it's one of their dominant features. And they'll find kind of the weaker person around, and they'll push them. They'll push you over. They'll come up to an adult, and they may bump into you. And well, he picked out Hunter as the weak one in the pack. And so Hunter's 3 years old, and this dog, we'd be playing around and everything, and you'd see his name was Rev. Rev. It stood for Reverend Moses. That was his full name, but we just called him Rev. He just looked like this. And so he'd be running around, and he'd see Hunter, and you see him, and he'd just be like, dunk, and just knock him over. And Hunter would be like, ah. When that would happen, I would grab Rev, and I'd push him over. And I'd go, "Come here, Hunter," and we would hold him down. And we would show dominance over, and we'd push him over, we'd hold him down, we'd push him. He'd see that weakness, and he'd push him, and then I would go so far as when I would feed him, this was early on, training as a pup, I would have the kids come with me, and I'm like, you put the food down. They put the food down, and I'm right there, and I'm like, "Now I want you to take his food away." And they take his food away. And then they put the food down, they take his food away. I didn't want that dog thinking he had any authority over this pack, right? And he had this idea he would push. Well, he stopped that because we trained him. I can tell you, you have an enemy of your soul that comes around, looks for a weakness, and wants to push. But we have a God that we serve that's more than able to take care of it. When the enemy pushes, He's given you the ability to push back. Sometimes it requires a push, and we understand this. We understand this in the physical realm. We understand what it is to push through. If you've ever gone for a workout, if you've ever gone to get in shape, you got to push. You don't feel like it always. If you've ever been in a race, you have to push. If you've ever been in any kind of competition as an athlete, you push. There's also this aspect, we understand the push beyond the physical. We also understand it in a social push. If you read the news, you look, people have agendas, platforms, rights. They're pushing socially. We understand what it is to mentally push through. We mentally push, but sometimes you ever have fear. You walk into a dark room, sometimes you can't see, and you've got to get to the other side of the room to turn the light on, and you're just like, okay, it's not going to get me. Nothing's going to catch me, and you kind of push mentally through something. You have some anxiety, you have some stress going on. You push through. What I want to hone in on today is this idea of a spiritual push. A spiritual push. We don't often think about it. We don't often look at it that way, but this spiritual push, if you're taking notes, spiritual pushes. Courage precedes combustion. Courage precedes combustion. I want to take us back to the backstory last week. If you didn't watch, or if you weren't here and you didn't see the sermon, go to our YouTube channel. You can go to our website, crosswalkcc.com. You can find the sermon And it was this idea of wavering between two opinions. We've got to face it today. Sometimes we've got to push. And this idea of a spiritual push, courage precedes combustion. We're going to go back to the story, Elijah, the prophet, the man of God. We're talking again about him today, but last week, the backstory. Elijah is the prophet in the kingdom of Israel. Israel, the nation, is split. They're disunified at this point. They're split between two kingdoms, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom is called Israel. The southern kingdom is called Judah, yet they're all part of the children of Israel. The northern kingdom, the king's name is Ahab. We talked about this last week. The prophet in that area is Elijah. Elijah is being used of God. Elijah is prophesying. Elijah is telling the word of the Lord. And there was this showdown, and Elijah and 400 prophets of Baal. King Ahab had a wife, an evil lady. Say, evil lady. Evil lady. Say, ooh, she's bad. Jezebel. Jezebel has employed 450 prophets of Baal, this idol, it's pagan worship, the Asherah, almost like a totem pole type religion. And Elijah takes on these 450 prophets of Baal, and there's two altars prepared, and the people are wavering between two opinions, and he says, how long are you going to do this? Either God's God serve him or Baal's God serve him, and the people didn't say anything, and so there's this showdown, and here's Elijah and 450 prophets, and they dance around all day long, raving, cutting themselves, calling out to Baal, and nothing happens. Elijah comes, he sets the altar, he faces it, he sets the altar in order again. Courage, 1 on 450, sets the altar in order. Praise to God, and the fire of God comes down, consumes the altar. Let me read it to you, 1 Kings 18, 38 through 40. Then the fire of the Lord fell, consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, the Lord, He is God, the Lord, He is God. They're not wavering between two opinions anymore. And Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon and slaughtered them there. I mean, this is a crazy story, right? Power of God comes down, consumes the altar. Courage preceded combustion. The fire of God. You may need some things in your life burned up by the fire of God. You may need the power of God to show up in a big way. Courage, faith is going to precede that. Elijah, he was truly a man of God. And sometimes we look at somebody like that and we go, I could never be like that. I could never have faith like that. There's just something in common about it. I could never walk in those shoes. I could never do that. It's interesting. James 5, 16 through 18, the book of James, James, the brother of Jesus, he writes this later in the New Testament about Elijah. He first tells us, verse 16, the prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. And we're like, amen, amen. But then he brings in the context of it. Verse 17, Elijah was a man with a nature just like ours. And he prayed fervently that it might not rain. And for 3 years and 6 months, it did not rain on the earth. And then he prayed again, and heaven gave rain, and the earth bore its fruit. I mean, that levels the playing field. The Bible tells us Elijah was a man just like us. Elijah was a man no different than you and I. Just a man who had hurts, a man who had pains, a man who had questions, a man who had fears. When push came to shove, he was just like you and me. It's interesting to note, if you can write this in the side of your notes, what Elijah's name means. His name means God is my strength. God is my strength. That's his name. That's what his name means. We're going to come back to that in a moment. Okay, so I want to bring you back to a time where this great display of God's power, the fire had come down, consumed the altars. We're going to go back in time before that just happened. What James is talking about is this drought, this famine that's happened in the land. We're going to go back to before this power, this moment where God's fire comes down from heaven. Just before that, we're going to go back about 3.5 years into this time. And I want to show you something. And we're going to get up to this point, and we're going to see that even what we would say the best of the best, the faithful of the faithful, they hit times just like you and I that we have to push. We have to push through for his presence 1 Kings 17:1, now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. So Elijah is telling the king of Israel, the northern kingdom, he's saying, hey, listen, things are bad. This is horrible. And I'll tell you what, God has spoken, and there is going to be a drought. There's going to be a famine, and it's not going to change unless the Lord speaks to me and tells me what he's doing. Well, Ahab didn't like that. He hated Elijah. He actually would love for Elijah to die. And I'm sure the feeling was probably a little mutual. Elijah shares this. 3.5 years goes by. 1 Kings 18:1 through 2. After many days, the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, go show yourself to Ahab, that's the king, and I will send rain upon the earth. So Elijah went to show himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria. So when Elijah comes to Ahab to show himself, it's this meeting of the two. It's this contingent point. It's this push point. It's truly this point that you could say, well, it's Elijah against Ahab, but in reality, it's God against evil. It's God showing himself faithful. It came this serious pushing time. It started with judgment. The heavens were closed. No rain had fell on the land. We know rain, don't we? Especially the last couple weeks. I mean, they have no rain. Imagine for 3.5 years if we didn't have rain. I mean, we can go, after all the rains that we've had these past few weeks, we could go like 2 or 3 weeks, and everybody would be going, oh God, send rain. Lord, it's so dry. Our crops need it. Could you imagine 3.5 years? They have not seen rain for 3.5 years. So there's not just a drought. There's now a famine because they can't grow anything. Their livestock can't eat anything. There's nothing to eat. There's a severity going across the land. And Elijah comes to Ahab. He says, all right, we're going to meet together. Here's how it's going to be. God's going to do something. And it's at that point at this meeting that all the people have come around. The man of God has a message. He tells Ahab God's going to send rain. But you bring the 450 prophets of Baal around, and it's going to be 1 on 450, and we're going to see who's God. And that's when that display of power occurs. But there's still a famine, and there's still a drought going on. At that point, the 450 prophets are killed. It's right after this. There's this lull. There's this lull that happens. I mean, what a high. What an incredible thing. So much so that the people of God saw it and they said, the Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. I mean, revival broke out, but they still have a situation of a drought, still have a situation of a famine. Spiritual pushes. Write this down. Spiritual pushes. Victory precedes vulnerability. Victory precedes vulnerability. History will prove time and time again. Often there's a battle, there's a war, there's a victory, and then everybody takes their guards down. I mean, you can watch it in any sports event. You know, boxers, they get in and box, UFC, they get in, fight's over, winner's declared, everybody takes their gloves off, they take their mouthpieces out. They're very vulnerable at that point. You watch a football team, they win, great celebration, everybody takes the helmets off, takes the pads off. They're vulnerable. Victory precedes vulnerability. You got to see this. So right after the 450 prophets are killed, Elijah's enemies, these pagan priests are killed. We pick up on the story, 1 Kings 18:41 through 46. And Elijah said to Ahab, remember the drought, the famine's going on. He says, go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of the rushing of rain. Ahab has witnessed the power of God. He's witnessed all this. He's witnessed the killing of the 450. But he's also witnessed this drought, this famine. He's king over this land. Go eat, go drink. Rain's coming, rushing of rain. So verse 42, so Ahab went up to eat and to drink. In other words, you could say it, he went up to party. Man, this is great. And Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel. This is where it all went down. This is where the power of God happened. This is where that sacrifice was consumed. He goes up to Mount Carmel. And it says, and he bowed himself down on the earth and put his face between his knees. He's pushing. Because there's nothing in the clouds that are saying that rain's coming, but God spoke to you. See, some of you have, God spoke to something, and everything doesn't look like anything's changing, but God spoke it to you, and so you're just kind of sitting there. You relate with Elijah. Elijah's like, yeah, I just saw your power. This was great. At 450, they're gone, all this, and now I'm sitting on this mountain again, and I know that you told me you were sending rain, but nothing's changing, Lord. Can I tell you, church, it's at those times it's time to push. Here's what happened. Verse 43, and he said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. And he went up and looked and said, there's nothing. And he said, go again. 1 time, 2 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times it says. And at the 7th time he said, behold, a little cloud like a man's hand is rising from the sea. And he said, go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down lest the rain stop you. And in a little while, the heavens grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel city, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah. This is a cool part. And he gathered up his garment and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. You just hear what happened? Like, King, you need to get going because the rain's going to be coming. It's just a little cloud, just looks like a little storm coming. And then all of a sudden, raw, it happens. He gets on his chariot, he rides, and the power of God comes over Elijah. I don't know if he's wearing a toga-looking thing. I mean, I don't know. But he grabs it up, and he runs ahead of the chariot. It's about 6 miles is the distance here. Runs ahead of a horse and chariot. Okay, so Elijah, the man of God, is familiar. He's well acquainted with the power of God. Fire from heaven, boom, 450 prophets slaughtered. Rain, bah, empowered, running. The power of God, I mean, he's acquainted with this, right? You got to get this picture, this time to push. It's over 6 miles. I think King Ahab is given a second chance right here, and he blows it. Because he saw the power of God. He saw everything that had happened. He heard the word from the prophet about the drought. He heard the word that it's going to end. He saw the power of God. He goes to Jezreel, and he tells his wife, Jezebel, ooh, that evil woman, say that, ooh, that evil woman. Because she's the root of all this issue, all these problems. She's employed these 450 prophets. She also had 400 prophets of Asherah. She's put all this together. She's evil. She's pagan. I'm sure she's definitely demon-possessed, we would say. This is not good. Ahab goes and tells her everything that happens. She's mad. And here's what's interesting. Something happens that's really hard to understand unless you recall what I just said. Victory precedes vulnerability. In other words, our greatest vulnerability, your greatest vulnerability comes after your greatest victory at times. Look at the scripture, 1 Kings 19, 2 through 9. Then Jezebel, say it, evil woman, sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. What you did to my prophets? Oh yeah, by this time tomorrow? Oh yeah, buddy, you're mine. Even worse. It's going down. Now, if you look at what you know of Elijah, he's seen the power of God. He's seen it. He's experienced it. He's experienced in his body, physically, to be able to do what you physically can't do in this run. He has seen supernaturally fire consume the altar that he had repaired and faced with courage, 1 on 450. He's experienced it. It's not a matter of experience. It's not a matter of what he knows. This threat has now come, which was nothing new. They wanted him dead. The king wanted him dead. Now this is the queen. Buddy, I'm sending a message to you. We're coming for you. By this time tomorrow, you're going down. You're going down. This is how it's going to be. It's interesting. Verse 3. Then he was afraid. What? How could somebody like Elijah be afraid? Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. So he's going south. Remember the northern kingdom? The southern kingdom's Judah, northern kingdom's Israel. He's come to Judah. He drops his servant off and left his servant there, verse 4, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came and sat down under a broom tree, and he asked that he might die, saying, "It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers." And he lay down and slept under a broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him and said to him, "Arise and eat." Verse 6, and he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. It was a fundraiser for BGMC. So after church... No. And there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. Just appeared. I think that's cool. And he ate and drank and lay down again. Verse 7, and the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." And he arose and ate and drank and went in. It's interesting here, the strength of the food. Not the strength of the Lord, but the strength of the food, which was the provision of the Lord. 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. And there he came to a cave and lodged in it. And there's a whole backstory on the Mount of Horeb and everything with the children of Israel. You'll have to go back and look at that. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" This story's rich. This story's deep. This story is a complete illustration of what it is to push through, to experience not just the power of God and the provision of God, but his presence, to understand how pivotal his presence is in our life, to push for that presence. I underlined this, that what are you doing here, Elijah? You know, when I would get in trouble as a kid, my mom, she would say my full name. You know, I knew if my full name came out, like, I better duck, run, something, go to the Mount of Horeb, 40 days, 40 nights away from mom, because I'm getting ready to get it. You know, whatever it was, I was getting it. Alan Braden Bixler. If I heard that, yeah, it was ugly. Mom worked with me for 8 years at our church in Missouri. She was a secretary, and she would call me Pastor Alan. And people were like, "You make your mom call you pastor?" I'm like, "No, she just does that on her own." And she would refer to me, you know, "Pastor Allen said," or "Pastor Allen." But then there were times I might be cutting up with the staff or playing around, having fun, and she's like, "Alan Braden Bixler." And they're like, "Hey, you ain't pastor now, buddy." You know, and God says, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" The angel touched him. The angel didn't speak his name. The angel touched him twice. The first time he touches him, he says, "You need to arise, you need to eat." You know, sometimes when we don't feel good, we don't want to eat, we don't want to drink. We know we need to do that. We need sustenance. You got to drink. You know, your doctor will tell you, you need to eat, you need to drink, you need to, you got to get sustenance in. Yeah, no, I just don't feel like, okay. Elijah is so depressed, is so fearful. I just want to die. I don't want to do any. An angel comes. Hey, wake up. You need to eat. Here's the provision of God. It's a cake, jar of water. Provision, you got to take it. He goes back to sleep. Now, I don't know if he ate it all and then goes back to sleep and God provided more. I don't know, but I know this. Whatever he ate, he needed more. He needed more provision. So the angel comes to him and touches him again. "Hey, wake up. You got to eat more. This journey's too great. What you're about to go through, what you're about to do is too great for you. You got to eat all this. You got to take in the whole provision." I think there's times God provides for us, doesn't he? He provides. It's a miraculous provision. We may not even recognize it. We may even look at it and go, I don't know. I kind of don't want cake. I want this. I don't really want, if I just had this, then I would. And we look at it, we kind of snub our nose at it, or we just lay back down. We got to push, even to receive what God has for us, for his provision. See, spiritual pushes, write this down. Receiving precedes replenishing. Spiritual pushes, receiving precedes replenishing. See, too many times we want to replenish, but we don't want to receive. Or we got a problem with what we have received. We want something different. We want something more. We take care of that. We receive it, what God has provided. Then he replenishes. Again, 1 Kings 19:9 There he came to a cave and lodged in it. He's running, Elijah's running, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Calls him by his name. Remember what his name means. God is my strength. In other words, he's saying this to him. Put it in context. What are you doing here? God is my strength. What are you doing here? You've run for 40 days and 40 nights. God is my strength. What are you doing? It's time to push. It's push time. Spiritual pushes. Write this down. Starting here precedes getting there. Starting here precedes getting there. Too many times we just want to get there, but you know what? If I could just move up a little bit, if I could just get to this point, if I could just, then I could get there. No. Spiritual pushes. A spiritual push starting here precedes getting there. You got to start where you're at. Too many people, I just need to clean up my life. I just need to get more faith. I'll start coming to church more, and then starting here precedes getting there. Elijah was going to have to start there. He's in a cave. I've run away, Lord. I've forfeited myself. He could have played that game. Many of us do. No. Starting here precedes getting there. Elijah knew all too well the provision of God. I mean, he just had cake and water provided for him on hot coals. He just saw the power of God like none other completely consume a sacrifice. He just saw revival break out. He just saw evil be cast away. He just saw the judgment of God be lifted and rains come. He knows the power of God. He knows the provision of God. I can't help but think there's people here that you know the power of God and you know the provision of God, but it's as though you're stuck in a cave. It's as though you've run away from it. You forfeited yourself, and you have this issue of a spiritual push that starting here precedes getting there. 1 Kings 19, 10 through 11. He said, "I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts." This is him answering the Lord. "What are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? God is my strength." Great answer. He said, "I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left. And they seek my life to take it away." And he said, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord." I mean, he knew the provision. He knew the power. God says, all right, you go stand on the mount before the Lord. See, what he was lacking at that point was God's presence. He's lacking that presence, that reality that God's right there. He's never left. He's never forsaken him. We sang about it. It was time to push. Let me read you the account. 1 Kings 19, 11 through 19. And he said, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by. And a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?'" Again, he says this, "What are you doing here?" Now he's in his presence. "What are you doing here?" "God is my strength." He said, "I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword, and I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." And the Lord said to him, "You poor thing. Oh, let's get you a therapy dog." I'm not saying therapy dogs are wrong. I'm just saying that's what we expect God to do with us, doesn't it? "Oh, buddy, go back in the cave. That's tough. You're right. Come here. Let's hug it out. Let's find a safe space. You're troubled. Let's get you a counselor." I'm not saying counselors are bad. I'm not saying safe spaces are bad. I just think sometimes we want God to just cuddly, touchy-feely us when it's time to push. Just telling you. This is all true. Lord, only I, and they've sought my life, and everything's bad and horrible, and I understand your power, and I understand your provision, but man, I just want to quit. I'm running, and I'm here in this cave, and I could make it comfortable. And I love God's answer to him. Verse 15, and the Lord said to him, go. What? Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. I'm going back? Yeah, it's time to push. And when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael, because I'm mixing it up. I'm putting in new leaders. Elijah, I'm putting in new leaders. You're going to be faithful. I'm not done with you. You still have an anointing on you. All right, you done? All right, you've run for 40 days. I even made you some cake. This is good. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi you shall anoint to be king over Israel. Otherwise, I'm replacing Ahab and that crazy wife of his. Not saying wives are crazy. I'm just saying Jezebel was, okay? And Elisha the son, you got to get this. And Elisha, not Elijah, Elisha, it's a new prophet, the son of Shaphat of Abil Mahola, you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death, and the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. And so he departed from there and found Elisha. We're going to talk about him in weeks to come. In close, I want to close with this. Elijah's mindset, I'm all alone. Nobody understands. Elijah's mindset is, it was me on 450. It was me. It's me alone, and they're seeking my life, and there's nobody else that understands it. I've done this for you, God, and I've done that for you, God, and I've stood up, and now I just want to die. And God goes, okay, time out. Go. We're going to deal with this. Time to push. Go. You know my power. You know my provision. You're going to experience my presence now. I'm still going to use you. You're going to go anoint these new leaders. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring in some help for you. I'm actually going to bring in a man, Elisha. You're going to train him up. You're going to he's going to take your place. And what's wild is Elisha did double. He had a double portion of what Elijah had. If you thought Elijah was powerful, Elisha had a double portion. That was his prayer. We'll get there. Go. Push. Get this done. Yeah, you need my presence. See, I can't help but think that some of you, you're facing a situation, you just want to run away, you want to die, I'm stressed. And it's like you're hiding in this cave and you're looking for the power of God. And you know the power of God. You're looking for the provision of God because you've known the provision of God, but you've negated, you've forgotten, you've neglected His presence. His presence in your life. And you're going to have to push. The acrostic I use for push, oftentimes in my own life, is pray until something happens. Pray until something happens. Sometimes I got to push for that. And it may not happen today. It may not happen tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, but I push and I pray until something happens, because what it does is it doesn't align God with me, it aligns me with Him.